In 1989, Mazda unveiled a tiny, cheap, underpowered two-seater the rest of the industry barely took seriously. Nearly 40 years later, it's still here, and it has become the best-selling two-seater sports car the world has ever produced. That's the strange part. The British and the Italians practically invented the little roadster, and one by one, they let it die. A wave of newcomers tried to revive the idea and faded out. Only the Mazda survived, the last of its kind still in production. So, how did the simplest, least powerful sports car on the market outlast every rival and beat the car makers who got there first? To understand that, you have to go back to a single conversation in 1979 between an American journalist and a Mazda executive in Hiroshima. In 1979, an American journalist named Bob Hall was visiting Mazda's headquarters in Hiroshima as part of his work as West Coast editor for Auto Week and Automotive News. Hall was a Japanese language speaker, an enthusiast of British sports cars, and had moved from Motor Trend to Auto Week the year before. He had a meeting with Kenichi Yamamoto, Mazda's head of research and development, who would later become president of the company. During the meeting, Yamamoto asked Hall what kind of car he thought Mazda should build. Hall did not answer with a specification sheet or a market analysis. He answered with a description of a category that had effectively died a decade earlier: the lightweight, two-seat rear-wheel drive British roadster of the 1960s. The Lotus Elan, the Austin Healey Sprite, the MGB, the Triumph Spitfire. The cars Hall had grown up admiring, that had defined a generation of American driving enthusiasts, and that had been progressively killed off by emissions regulations, safety mandates, and the commercial collapse of the British automotive industry by the early 1970s. Hall told Yamamoto that no manufacturer was building those cars anymore. The market was empty. The category had been abandoned by every manufacturer that had previously served it. The American driving enthusiast who wanted a small, light, rear-wheel drive convertible had nowhere to go. The conversation did not produce an immediate product decision. Hall returned to the United States. Yamamoto continued running Mazda. The idea sat dormant for several years. In 1981, Hall left journalism to join Mazda's North American Research and Development Organization as a product planner. Yamamoto remembered Hall's idea. In April of 1984, Mazda convened a design competition at the company's Tokyo offices, in which 3 internal teams presented competing proposals for a small sports car. The Tokyo team proposed a coupe. The Hiroshima team proposed a front-engine, front-wheel drive layout. The California team, working with designers Tom Matano and Mark Jordan, proposed a front-engine, rear-wheel drive roadster that matched Hall's original description almost exactly. The California proposal, internally named Duo 101, was selected for development. A British engineering firm called International Automotive Design built a running fiberglass prototype, designated V705, in 1985. The prototype was shipped to Santa Barbara and driven on California roads, where the response was positive enough that Yamamoto, who had become Mazda's president in late 1985, recommended the project to the company's board of directors. The board granted final production approval on January 18, 1986. The program code was changed to P729 when the project moved into production phase under Chief Engineer Toshihiko Hirai, a Mazda veteran who had joined the company as a designer in 1961. The Japanese phrase Hirai chose to describe the engineering target was Jinba Ittai. The literal translation combines 3 concepts: person, horse, and as one body. The phrase originates in Yabusame, a Kamakura period ritual of mounted archery in which the archer fires 3 arrows at 3 targets while riding a galloping horse, with the underlying requirement being that the rider and the horse must move as a single unit for the archery to succeed. Hirai applied the concept to the relationship between driver and car. The brief was not horsepower. The brief was not top speed. The brief was not lap times. The brief was the specific quality of driver-car connection that made the original British roadsters feel like extensions of their drivers, even when those roadsters were objectively slower, less reliable, and less comfortable than the family sedans of the same period. The engineering targets that resulted were specific and were not negotiable. The curb weight target was approximately 1,000 kilograms, 2,200 pounds. The weight distribution target was perfectly 50-50 front to rear. The engine placement target was front-mid. The engine had to sit entirely behind the front axle line to optimize weight distribution and rotational inertia. The suspension target was independent double wishbones at all four corners with anti-roll bars front and rear, a layout that no production sports car at the Miata's intended price point had ever offered. The braking target was four-wheel disc brakes. The transmission target was a 5-speed manual gearbox with a shift action that the engineering team measured in millimeters of throw and grams of détente force. Each of these targets cost money. The double wishbone suspension was more expensive than the strut layout most competitors would use. The front mid-engine placement required a specific drivetrain packaging that did not exist on any other Mazda platform. The 50-50 weight distribution required relocating the battery, the fuel tank, and several other major components to non-standard positions. The 5-speed manual transmission had to be developed with specific shift kinematics rather than borrowed from an existing Mazda small car. The economics did not support any of these decisions. Mazda was, in the 1980s, a smaller manufacturer than Toyota, Honda, or Nissan, and was operating on tighter margins than any of its Japanese competitors. The conventional manufacturing logic for a low-volume sports car was to share as many components as possible with high-volume platforms to amortize the engineering cost across millions of vehicles. The Miata program rejected the conventional logic at every component-level decision. Hirai's team built the car the way the brief required, regardless of cost. The first Miata that rolled off the Ujina Plant No. 1 assembly line in Hiroshima in April of 1989 weighed exactly 2,116 pounds. The engine sat behind the front axle line. The weight distribution measured 50-50. The suspension used double wishbones at all four corners. The brakes were four-wheel discs with the front pair ventilated. The transmission was a 5-speed manual with a shift action that was, by period press accounts, the most precisely calibrated of any production car in the world at any price. The vehicle was unveiled at the Chicago Auto Show on February 10, 1989. The base price was $13,800. The engine was a 1.6-liter dual overhead cam, 4-cylinder, producing 116 horsepower and 100 lb-ft of torque. The 0 to 60 time was approximately 8.5 seconds. None of those numbers were impressive in isolation. The car that produced them was unlike anything available in the American market at any price. The Miata's commercial success was immediate and was larger than even Mazda had projected. The car went on sale in May of 1989 as a 1990 model. Dealers in Indianapolis had waiting lists of 15 to 25 customers within months of launch. Buyers in some markets paid thousands of dollars above sticker price to move to the top of dealer waiting lists. The first year's sales exceeded 20,000 units in the United States alone, against a product that the manufacturer had never built before, and a category that had not existed commercially in the American market since the early 1970s. The competitive response began approximately 6 years later. Every major manufacturer with the engineering capability and the brand position to enter the segment began developing a Miata competitor. BMW launched the Z3 at its new Spartanburg, South Carolina plant in September of 1995. The car was positioned as a premium alternative to the Miata, used the same general engineering layout, front engine, rear-wheel drive, 2-seat convertible, and offered a 6-cylinder engine option that the Miata's 4-cylinder could not match on horsepower or sound. The Z3 sold well through the late 1990s, with annual American volumes peaking at over 20,000 units in 1998. It was discontinued in 2002 and replaced by the Z4. Mercedes-Benz launched the SLK in 1995 as well, with a different engineering approach, a folding hardtop instead of a soft top, more luxury content, and a higher price. The SLK positioned itself upmarket of the Miata and downmarket of the Mercedes SL. It sold approximately 12,000 units in the United States at peak in 2005. It was renamed the SLC in 2016 and discontinued in 2020. Porsche launched the Boxster in 1996. The Boxster was positioned at a substantial premium to the Miata. Base prices started at approximately $40,000 against the Miata's $15,000, and used a mid-engine, six-cylinder layout that placed it in a different engineering category. The Boxster was the rare Miata competitor that successfully avoided direct competition by moving so far upmarket that the two cars rarely cross-shopped. The Boxster remains in production in 2026, although at base prices that have risen above $65,000 and against documented sales declines of more than 50% from peak. Honda launched the S2000 in 1999 as a 2000 model. The S2000 took the most aggressive engineering approach of any Miata competitor, a high-revving 2-liter inline-4 that produced 240 horsepower at 9,000 revolutions per minute, a 50-50 front-to-rear weight distribution achieved through a front mid-mounted engine, and a 6-speed manual gearbox with shift action that period press described as the closest thing to a motorcycle transmission anyone had ever fitted to a passenger car. The S2000 was, by every objective performance metric, superior to the Miata. It was also, by every commercial metric, less successful. Honda discontinued the S2000 in June of 2009 after approximately 110,000 units across 10 model years. Audi launched the TT Roadster in 1999 on the Volkswagen Golf platform. The TT was the most stylistically distinctive Miata competitor and the only one to use a front-wheel drive layout. The TT produced reasonable sales through the 1990s and 2000s before progressively declining. American sales dropped from over 10,000 units annually at peak to 516 in 2022. Audi discontinued the TT in November of 2023 after 25 years. Toyota launched the third-generation MR2, the MR2 Spider, in 1999. The Spider used a mid-engine layout that placed it closer to the original Lotus Elise than to the Miata in engineering philosophy. It sold in small numbers, generated mixed press reviews, and was discontinued in 2007. General Motors launched the Pontiac Solstice in 2005 and the Saturn Sky in 2006. Both cars used the same GM Kappa platform, both targeted the Miata segment, and both produced superior horsepower numbers, 260 horsepower in turbocharged form against the Miata's 170. Both cars also produced inferior driving dynamics by virtually every period review. Both cars died in 2010 when General Motors killed the Pontiac and Saturn brands during the post-bankruptcy restructuring. Fiat launched the 124 Spider in 2016 as a rebodied Miata built on the same Hiroshima assembly line, with Fiat sheet metal, a Fiat-supplied turbocharged engine, and Fiat-specific interior trim. The 124 Spider was, in effect, an admission by Fiat that the company could not engineer a Miata competitor from scratch, and would instead build one on Miata mechanicals through a partnership agreement. Fiat discontinued the 124 Spider in 2020 after approximately 4 years. BMW ended Z4 production at the Magnasteyr plant in Graz, Austria in March of 2026. The final BMW Roadster had sold approximately 10,000 units globally in its final year of production. BMW has confirmed there is no successor model planned. The pattern of competitive failure is not random. Across 37 years and a dozen direct competitors with engineering resources, brand equity, and marketing budgets larger than Mazda's, no manufacturer has produced a car that has matched the Miata's combination of lightweight, 50-50 weight distribution, front mid-engine placement, double wishbone suspension at all 4 corners, manual gearbox with calibrated shift action, and base price near $30,000 across the model's full production life. The structural reasons for the failure trace to 4 specific issues that the competitors could not solve. The first issue was weight. The Miata's 2,116-pound curb weight at launch in 1989 was not achieved by accident. The weight target was a non-negotiable engineering constraint that drove every component-level decision across the program. Every other manufacturer that entered the segment built a heavier car. The Z3 weighed approximately 2,600 pounds. The SLK weighed approximately 2,900 pounds. The Boxster weighed over 3,100 pounds. The S2000 weighed approximately 2,800 pounds. The Solstice and Sky weighed nearly 3,000 pounds. The Audi TT weighed over 3,100 pounds. The competitors all added between 400 and 1,000 pounds to the Miata's curb weight. The added weight was the result of more powerful engines, additional luxury content, structural reinforcement for higher cornering speeds, and component sharing with heavier platforms. The added weight defeated the Miata's central engineering proposition. The driver who wanted Jinba Ittai could not get it from a car that weighed 3,000 pounds. The second issue was the philosophy. The Miata was engineered around the concept that driving feel mattered more than driving speed. The competitors were generally engineered around the opposite concept, that more power, more grip, and faster acceleration would produce a better driver's car. The S2000 had nearly twice the Miata's horsepower. The Z4 had 4 times the Miata's torque in its M40 version. The Boxster's mid-engine layout produced cornering speeds the Miata could not approach. By every objective measurement of performance, the competitors were superior. By the subjective measurement of how the cars felt to drive at the speeds American buyers actually drove them, the competitors were inferior. The Miata's success was built on the assumption that the driver who actually bought the car would never drive it at its limit. The competitors were built on the opposite assumption. The competitors were wrong. The third issue was the price. The Miata launched at $13,800 in 1989 and has remained the most affordable production sports car in the American market across its entire model life. The 2026 Miata base price is approximately $30,000. The Z4 Final Edition base price was over $78,000. The Boxster base price is over $65,000. The S2000 at peak was $34,000. The Audi TT was over $50,000 in its final years. The competitors all moved up market as their development costs rose and as their volumes declined. The Miata did not. Mazda kept the Miata accessible to the buyer who could not afford a $40,000 sports car, which was the same buyer who had originally created the Miata's commercial success in 1989. The fourth issue was organizational. Mazda treated the Miata as a halo product that defined the brand. The competing manufacturers treated their roadsters as portfolio additions that complemented existing core products. When the roadsters became commercially marginal, the competing manufacturers killed them off without strategic consequence. Mazda could not kill off the Miata without abandoning the cultural identity the company had built around the model. The Miata's continued existence has been a non-negotiable corporate commitment at Mazda for 37 years. The same commitment did not exist at BMW, Mercedes, Porsche, Honda, Audi, Toyota, General Motors, or Fiat. The competing manufacturers built roadsters because the segment looked profitable. Mazda built the Miata because the company would not be Mazda without it. The final structural reason the Miata cannot be replicated traces to a level of organizational commitment that does not exist anywhere else in the modern automotive industry. Mazda is, in 2026, the smallest of the major Japanese manufacturers. Annual production is approximately 1.25 million vehicles globally. By comparison, Toyota produces over 10 million annually. Honda produces over 4 million. Nissan produces over 3 million. Mazda operates on margins that are tighter than any of its larger Japanese competitors, and on engineering budgets that are fractions of the budgets at General Motors, Volkswagen, or Stellantis. A small manufacturer with limited capital and tight margins should not, by conventional manufacturing logic, be the company that builds the world's best-selling sports car for 37 consecutive years. The economics do not support the commitment. The volumes do not justify the engineering investment. The profit margins on a sports car selling around $30,000 at retail are too thin to fund the kind of clean-sheet platform development that the fourth-generation Miata required. The commercial record across the model's 4 generations documents the scale of what Mazda has actually accomplished. The first-generation Miata, internally designated NA, sold over 430,000 units across 8 model years from 1990 through 1997. The second-generation Miata, NB sold over 290,000 units from 1999 through 2005. The third generation NC sold approximately 240,000 units from 2006 through 2015. The fourth generation ND, which launched in 2015, has already sold over 250,000 units and continues in production. The cumulative production total passed 1 million units on April 22, 2016, at Mazda's Ujina Plant No. 1 in Hiroshima. The total passed 1.25 million in 2023. The Miata has held the Guinness World Record for the best-selling two-seat sports car in history since the year 2000, with the record being updated 5 times across the model's production life. Mazda built the fourth-generation Miata regardless of the economics. The platform was clean sheet. The body was aluminum-intensive. The weight target, 2,332 pounds for the base model, was lower than the third-generation car. The engineering philosophy was identical to the original Hirai brief from 1984. The fourth-generation Miata won the World Car of the Year award and the World Car Design of the Year award, the first car to win both awards in the same year, and continues in production in 2026. The fifth-generation Miata is in development. Mazda has confirmed that the platform will continue the Jinba Ittai philosophy, will retain the front mid-engine layout, and will not abandon the manual transmission. The car will probably remain the world's best-selling sports car for the same reason the car has been the world's best-selling sports car for the previous 37 years. Because Mazda is the only manufacturer that has the organizational discipline to build it. The competitive failure across 37 years has not been a failure of engineering capability. BMW could have built a lighter Z3. Honda could have priced the S2000 below the Boxster. Mercedes could have kept the SLC in production. General Motors could have funded a second-generation Solstice. Every competing manufacturer had the resources to compete with the Miata directly. None of them had the organizational commitment to do it. The Miata's success is, by every measurable definition, hard to replicate. The car has now sold over 1.25 million units globally. The car holds the Guinness World Record for the best-selling two-seat sports car in history, a record that has been updated 5 times across the model's production life. The car is the only direct competitor in its segment, still in production in 2026. The car the American journalist Bob Hall described to Kenichi Yamamoto in Hiroshima in 1979 is the same car that Mazda is still building 37 years later. The competitors who attempted to copy the formula have all been buried. The original is still on sale. The deeper lesson of the Miata's commercial dominance is not about engineering specifications. The double wishbone suspension, the 50-50 weight distribution, the front mid-engine placement, these are documented engineering choices that any major manufacturer could have replicated at any point in the past 37 years. The lesson is about commitment. The Miata exists because Mazda has, for nearly 4 decades, treated the car as the defining product of the brand and refused to compromise on the engineering targets that define the driving experience. When the segment became commercially marginal in the 2010s, every other manufacturer in the world withdrew. Mazda did not. When the development cost of the fourth-generation car threatened the program's economic viability, Mazda entered a partnership with Fiat in 2012 that allowed Fiat to co-fund the ND platform development in exchange for the right to build a rebodied version on the same Hiroshima assembly line. When the cost of a clean-sheet platform still exceeded what a low-volume sports car could justify, Mazda absorbed the remaining engineering investment on the strength of corporate commitment rather than financial return. The competing manufacturers made the opposite decisions. BMW canceled the Z4 when the math stopped working. Mercedes canceled the SLC. Honda canceled the S2000. Audi canceled the TT. General Motors canceled the Solstice in the Sky. Fiat canceled the 124 Spider. Toyota canceled the MR2. Each of these cancellations was an economically rational decision. Each was also a competitive concession that left the Miata as the last car standing in a segment Mazda had originally created. The buyer who walks into a Mazda dealership in 2026 and orders an MX-5 is buying a car that traces its design philosophy to a Japanese ritual of mounted archery. Its product brief to a 1979 conversation between an American journalist and a Japanese executive, and its commercial existence to a corporate commitment that no other manufacturer has matched in the 4 decades since. The car costs approximately $30,000. It weighs approximately 2,300 pounds. It produces 181 horsepower from a normally aspirated 2-liter 4-cylinder. It uses a 6-speed manual gearbox with shift action that has been calibrated across 4 generations of continuous engineering refinement. It is, by every measurable specification, the closest commercially available expression of what a lightweight sports car was supposed to be when Bob Hall described the concept to Kenichi Yamamoto in 1979. Nobody has built a better one. Many have tried. The pattern of competitive failure across 37 years is the documented evidence that some kinds of success are not engineering problems that can be solved with sufficient resources. Some kinds of success require an organizational culture that produces specific decisions consistently for decades, regardless of whether the math supports each individual decision in each individual year. Mazda has that culture. No other manufacturer in the modern automotive industry has demonstrated the same culture across the same length of time on the same product. The Miata is the result. Before you go, check the link in the description to grab your used car buying guide and avoid getting scammed or overpaying. Trust me, this will help you a lot. Now, click on this next video to see the car that took the opposite approach to driving dynamics. The American sports car that bet everything on raw horsepower, structural rigidity, and a 5.7-liter pushrod V8 that produced numbers no Japanese roadster could approach. And that became the most commercially successful Corvette generation in the model's history, the Chevrolet Corvette C5.